Hello everyone, this is Philip. As a part of Phan's UCAT education, welcome to this video. And today, this will hopefully start off the first of many videos on how to actually do the UCAT. And pretty much what I'm going to be going through today is just a nice little brief introduction to verbal reasoning. So without further ado, let's get started. Just want to show you guys as well, I'm here, actually, literally in Nha Trang right now in Vietnam. So that's actually the beach side right there. And hopefully the noise on the beach isn't too loud. I'll go check it. And actually I might remove it if it's a bit too loud later in the video. But yeah, just want to show you guys because actually the first video is going to be made in this nice little beach setting outside of my hotel room. But then the thing is that later on it's probably going to be a bit too mundane in my own room back home in Australia. So without further ado, let's actually get started. I'm just going to share my screen first and show you guys. Alrighty, cool. Oh, okay, there you go. Perfect. So, just going to give you guys a very quick introduction on what verbal reasoning actually is. I want to warn you guys that there's not going to be any sort of crazy UCAT tips or anything like that being shared right here. That's going to be for a later video. This is just pretty much just going to be giving you guys a pure basic introduction on what you're going to actually see in verbal reasoning. Purely introductory, and hopefully you can find later videos on the actual tips which I'll provide, which have been very successful for my students. I just want to remind you guys as well, just before I start, that I actually do offer private or group tutoring as well for the UCAT, and that's going to be advertised on this website right here. Just go to this link right here. You can also just search up Phillip Phan on tutorfinder.com, and then from there, you're going to actually be able to find my account, and you can contact me there for some UCAT tutoring, or just with any sort of inquiries you may have, or you can also get added to my Discord server where I sort of help you guys out with UCAT wherever I need to. But for now, just going to go through verbal reasoning. Okay, so let's get started. So a quick overview of what we're going to be doing today. So pretty much there are going to be a few main teaching points. I'm just going to introduce you guys to the general premise and structure of verbal reasoning in the UCAT. I'm going to then go into question types, which is just simply the question types they have in the UCAT, the timing for verbal reasoning, which is obviously very important, marking as well, just how the questions are marked and how they're valued, very important. What you actually need to score to be considered to have a very good verbal reasoning score, because actually this is very ambiguous, and you have many sources from different countries that do the UCAT that will come up with different numbers, and which you'll see later. So I think it's actually very important to discuss, and a final summary to wrap it all up. And there's my logo as well, by the way. It's pretty cool. I'm gonna probably get that changed later, but I found it on Fiverr for like $60, and I was like, why not? Let's go for it, because I really like the logo. It has like the colors of the UCAT. I thought it'd be like a fancy look. But anyways, let's get started. So what is the general premise and structure for verbal reasoning for the UCAT? All right. So the general premise and structure for verbal reasoning of the UCAT is that you pretty much just have a text of 250 to 400 words. And actually this has been increased recently, at least for Australians. They used to make the text very short, but because they're worried about people scoring too well, they made it longer. And you're going to see this reflected in the UK as well. It's also split into 2 to 7 paragraphs, and you get, after the text, questions being asked based on the actual text itself. Now I mentioned 2 to 7 paragraphs because that is actually very important. That is going to be for a tip video later. So you have 44 questions to answer in 21 minutes, and each text is linked to 4 questions with that text. So pretty much what you're going to have is a text with 4 questions attached to it pretty much. And that means that if you have 44 questions, you have 11 texts with 4 questions each for that text as well. So that's going to be quite a bit of reading to do, and you might get the idea it's really a bit hard to do within that time. There are 2 different question types that you can be asked as well, which we'll talk about later. And also, this is actually a very highly emphasized section for medicine universities, but it's very commonly under-practiced. People seem to underestimate the difficulty of verbal reasoning, and they don't practice as much. And the thing is that even if they actually estimate it right, they think that they can study in like a 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 ratio across all 5 sections, which is wrong. You need to practice more for verbal reasoning, and I'll sort of explain why later. Okay. So I wanted to just show you guys an example of what one of these texts look like right here. So I literally pulled this off Medify UK, and I want to also say that I'm actually an ambassador to Medify UK as well, which means that if you guys actually want an account and everything like that, you can just let me know and I'll be able to set you guys up. And also, this is also gotten after an inquiry with them as well. So, so just to go on with the actual text itself. So as you can see right here, 4 paragraphs of this text right here. It's quite long. This is sort of like more of like a middle length sort of text here. I'd say it's about average. It's around 200 to 250 words and everything, bunch of numbers, lots of different techniques, but that is the text for verbal reasoning, okay? So that's what the text looks like. We'll go through some questions in a moment. All right, so now let's actually talk about the actual question types for verbal reasoning. So I mentioned before, there are two different types of questions in verbal reasoning. In fact, more specifically, there are the general question and answer questions, in addition to the true, false, can't tell questions. So what do I mean when I say general answer questions and also these true, false, can't tell questions? Well, for the general answer questions, you get a regular standard question being asked, and that's why you use the name general. So it's just like saying something like, what is true? Which statement is true? And they give you 4 different statement responses. And that's also why I use the word general, because it's very general. Now, that might not make much sense at the moment, but please listen on, because I've explained it with pictures, which might make it a bit clearer. So that's important. And also now I'm going to talk about the true, false, can't tell questions. So with the true, false, can't tell questions, you actually get a statement. Okay, so you get a statement. It will say something like, Maria loves eating food. And then, so that's the actual question itself. And then they give you 3 answer options, these being true, false, and can't tell. And that's why we call them true, false, can't tell questions. And the actual tips to answer these questions, I'll give you guys in a future tutorial. But for now, I'm going to limit that. But there are so many different tips and so many things that you can understand about this. But in this more sort of longer video format, I can't go into this without making this literally a full lesson. All right. So here is an example of a true, false, can't tell question. So the true, false, can't tell question, you have your text, obviously, and then you have literally right here, as you can see on the right of my screen there, a statement with true, false, or can't tell as your answer option. So you can see right here, it's not a question. It's not saying what is the, the year in which this person passed away, or what is the year that this plane took off? What is the year that this person was born, or something like that? It's just a pure statement. Most people in Hungary believe the law to be beneficial for the country. A pure statement. And then you have true, false, and can't tell for that. And then later as well, I'll discuss exactly what those mean. Because if you don't actually understand what true, false, or can't tell means, you're kind of screwed. But anyways, so that's the true, false, can't tell question, sourced from Medify as well. Next question right here, verbal reasoning, general answer question. Okay, so a text as always. And now this is what I mean by general answer. So as you can see right here, the general answer question pretty much means that you actually have the question itself is an actual question, right? It's saying which of the following can be deduced from the passage. And you can have so many different question types based off that general question idea. They're going to ask like, which of the following statements would the author most likely agree with? That sort of stuff. Or maybe even which year was this person born? It could really be anything. Lots of different questions, some harder than others. We'll go through that in a moment. And then you have 4 statement answers, as you can see. So it's not true, false, or can't tell. They actually give you 4 statements as your answer, okay? So it'll be like nylon is stronger than polypropylene, which is stronger than hemp. So it's just like a regular type of question, and then answers based off that question, and the answers pretty much are actually based off the question, and they use statements as well. It's literally just a question and answer sort of format and everything, if that makes sort of sense. And our sources from the original official UCAT verbal reasoning question bank, I do want to warn you guys that that text right there is not entirely new. This is from the 2019 question bank that I last saw, and nowadays they made it much longer, so watch out. Alrighty, so let's talk about the timing now. The timing is actually very important to actually understand for the UCAT as well, and we're going to talk about more tips later, but this is a basic introduction. So as I mentioned previously, you have 21 minutes to answer 44 questions. I want to note that that is for UCAT in general. It's the same for the UK and Australia, and whichever country they do the UCAT in, it's the same anywhere. So with 21 minutes to answer 44 questions, that means doing the calculation, 21 divided by 44, you have around 28.36 seconds per question. And then you'll notice that everyone simplifies and I'll simplify it as well. It's around 30 seconds a question. But note that you just have a little bit under that. But then the thing is that, remember that actually the questions are grouped in bunches of 4 per text. So remember, you have the text of 4 questions. It's not one text and 1 question or anything varying. It's always 1 text and 4 questions. And that means you have 11 texts each with 4 questions. And pretty much, it's actually better to consider the timing with the questions grouped with the text as one big combo. So the way I like to see it is that you're also going to be spending 30 times 4, 2 minutes per text and 4 questions. And that is actually extremely important when it comes to actually talking about techniques to actually read and approach the passage, because there's actually many different ways to read and approach a passage, which I'll be talking about later as a part of my teaching. But you do need to be exactly very, very careful with that. And I'm going to be discussing that in a future video myself. All right. So the marking for verbal reasoning. What is the marking for verbal reasoning like and everything? Okay, so this is actually very important to discuss. So when it comes to the marking for verbal reasoning, you need to actually understand that verbal reasoning follows a linear approach. So that means that a single question right will have the same impact no matter what the overall score is. That means that, for example, so this is mentioned because sometimes you have situations where, like, for example, in my country, Australia, you have like the HSC, and pretty much you score like, and there's scaling. So if you get like 30 out of 90, you get a score of like 40. But if you get like a score of like, say, no, so here's a better example. So you get a score of 90 out of 100, you get like a 97 out of 100. And then you get like scaled. And then you have 91 of 92, so just 1 or 2 marks increase, and then your overall mark will still be 97 or something like that. So if you, and scaled. So pretty much the general idea is just that, see and there, each individual mark is actually not worth the same. It depends on how many questions you get right. Here it's linear. Each question right will be exactly the same amount of overall points, no matter what the overall score is, okay? And now I mentioned that because it's actually very important for techniques in terms of skipping and everything, how you guys actually skip questions, very, very important. And I want to note as well that all questions, either the general questions or the true, false, can't tell questions, are worth the exact same. They're worth 1 mark, okay? And remember as well, each mark is worth the exact same, okay? So it's not like 1 mark here is going to be more valuable in other sections. It's not for the general UCAT at all, but sometimes you have like 1 mark be more valuable in other tests, I think I've seen. So it's not really the best, okay? So now let's actually talk about the scoring overall as well. So there's marks, and the marks get turned into scores. So there are 44 questions in the verbal reasoning section, as we discussed, and scores range from a minimum of 300 to 900. In fact, that's the range for the main 4 sections: verbal reasoning, decision-making, quantitative reasoning, and abstract reasoning. They range from 300 to 900, and each question, therefore, is worth, by the calculation there, 13.63 points per question. But it's not like they're like, okay, I get a question right, and then I add 13.63. They don't take it individually. They sort of take it as like one bunch. So it's like, okay, well, I've got 40 questions. You got 40 out of 44, 40 times 13.63, then you add that to 300 pretty much. But that's not exactly the case as well. They have like certain ranges and certain scores you get for certain questions that you get right, and we'll look at that table later. I noted as well that there is no backwards marking, okay? So for some reason, people always seem to worry about this. I think maybe it's because you lose marks for getting questions wrong, and I think that's maybe been historical, but at least in the UCAT, know that if you get a question wrong, you don't actually lose any marks, and that's going to be very good. Alrighty. And there's a table, so I'm going to show you that the table as well. So here's the table right here. Whoops. And pretty much that just shows you the score that you kind of get for the actual marks you get in the actual verbal reasoning section. And you kind of notice that barring like, 0 to 5 for verbal reasoning, we get 300, and 41 to 44 in verbal reasoning, we get 900. Notice how the progression here is actually kind of like, linear and everything. So notice how, for example, look at maybe 600 to 630, there's like a 1 or 2 mark increase, and then you get an extra 30 points. So that kind of follows that 1 mark is equal to 13.63 points. Sort of structure that I was kind of talking to you guys about. And then obviously, as I mentioned before, the 300 to 900, they're the ones which actually pack it a bit more and everything. Maybe not as linear when we consider those, but for the most part, it's very linear. The mark as you get an extra mark, you get about an extra 15 points, and that's very important to note. And I source this from Blackstone Tutors, which is okay. All right, so now here's the actual juicy part and everything. What do you need to score? Okay, so it's actually very important to actually consider what you need to score for the UCAT. And actually, it's in fact more important than other sections. You're going to notice actually, especially for Australian students, that verbal reasoning actually has more precedence over other sections when it comes to at least one particular medicine university, which I'll talk about. So, but the thing is that for both Australia and the UK, the verbal reasoning weighting is either scaled or their actual minimum score thresholds for entry for medicine and dentistry universities. In fact, more specifically in the UK, they actually do use medicine scores and increase scaling. For verbal reasoning, they also have minimum scores as well. So that's actually very important. We'll talk about that in a moment. So average for verbal reasoning for 2022 in Australia, because of the statistics that we have, was 580. In the UK, it was 586. And I'll talk about that more on the next page. But I want to remind you guys now that actually to just score average or slightly above average, that's actually not the goal. The thing is that you don't want to actually just get 600 or just get average, because actually, especially for Australians, to do well in the UK, you actually need to be exceptional. So I prefer you guys to use thresholds for either the 90th percentile or minimum entry requirements as a gauge. And the reason why I say 90th percentile is because pretty much to get into a medicine university in Australia, your UCAT at minimum has to be the 90th percentile. You get below that, you actually don't have much of a chance unless you go to like one of the one of those smaller universities, or not just a small university, one of those rare universities. They're very, very rare. So that would be like University of Tasmania or something like that. They don't really care about the UCAT that much. But for any sort of university like Western Sydney University or UNSW, it's going to be very important. And pretty much with the 90th percentile, it's 2980, which means that you should be going for around 740 or 750. Okay, but you might be thinking that's going to be pretty hard. And in fact, I didn't really get 740, 750 myself. I actually ended up getting, I got 740 actually, so that's okay. But the minimum threshold actually for Western Sydney University in 2019 is actually 670. Okay, so actually, if you want to get into Western Sydney University, you need to get at minimum 670. That means that even if you did 900 in every single other section and you got below 670, you won't get a chance. It's not exact. I think maybe it was like 630 or something like that. It's somewhere in that range. And it's just been so long and there's been no official sort of reported mark. I'm taking this anecdotally. I also want to remind you guys as well that it's scaled. So actually, say if you got a 90th percentile, you can't just get the minimum for WSU. You need to get like say 750 in order to actually make up for that. So it's like a scaled minimum threshold, if that makes sense. Okay. So it's very important that you guys actually do very well. And I'm not sure if this threshold has remained, but I'd imagine while they ever change, it's always been like that. Now let's talk about the UK. It's a little bit more lax. So actually, you don't even need to get 2900. It's more like 2600, 2700, which I've sort of seen is kind of the average for UK entry. But I'm just looking at the top score possible, just to sort of give you guys a general working range. And actually, with that being 2900, you need to sort of get 730 and 740 as a general sort of target and everything. And note an example university is Nottingham. They actually double the verbal reasoning weighting for medicine. So they have like a point system to determine, your overall points. They weigh that with like, SJT and also like your school marks, your participation or whatever as well, or your uni marks. And the thing is that the weighting for verbal reasoning is doubled. So instead of giving you like say 9 points for getting the certain mark, they give you 18 instead. So it's very important that you guys do well in verbal reasoning. And it's a very strong sort of emphasis. Many people always just get this wrong and they think they can take it lightly and everything. They think you can be satisfied with a mediocre score. No, you cannot be satisfied with a mediocre score. You need to put in the extra hard work to make sure that your score in verbal reasoning is very, very good. Yes, it may not be 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 in time. It may be 3 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, but that's what you're going to have to do to succeed because this is a very important section. Okay, and here's a sort of table and everything to sort of show you guys the sort of mean scores and everything for verbal reasoning, this being in Australia. So you can kind of see right here, the mean was 578 overall, to be exact, and the fifth percentile, so 580, kind of like the minimum, the 50th percentile, is around 580. So people don't actually do that well in this section. But the thing is that, it is still very important that you hold yourself to a high standard right here. 9th percentile is 680. But keep in mind, again, that's not the score that you want to aim for both, Australian UCAT, UK UCAT students. It's around 730, 740, as I mentioned previously. And this has been a source from the official UCAT website for Australia. And some more means and everything. So the top one shows the means of UK, the bottom shows the means of Australia, and these are taken across years. Yeah, people don't usually do very well in verbal reasoning and everything. It really does kind of suck. But this is not, I'm not showing you guys this and everything for you to get complacent. It's more just for your own interest. You guys really do need to make sure that you don't get complacent with this and make sure you work very hard to achieve the highest scores you possibly can for verbal reasoning. Okay, so 750 is a very good sort of decent score. I got 740 and everything, and I'm actually very disappointed with that. It's very important that you do very well in this sort of section right here. This is of maximal importance, and I'm going to be giving you guys tips later on how to actually maximize your scores. And this has been sourced from the Medic portal. Okay, so let's give a quick final summary to everything that's been taught today. So verbal reasoning is a section that fundamentally involves you reading text and answering questions regarding them. 44 questions to be answered in 21 minutes. 2 different types of questions, general questions and true, false, can't tell questions. It's important as well to consider the questions and text as a group rather than separately. So you consider it as 2 minutes per text and 4 questions as a combo. Each question is marked with the same value, worth 1 mark, and each mark is worth the exact same. So it's not like if you were to get like 50 out of 51, then your 1 mark is going to be different to say if you got 30 out of 51 or something like that. It's all the same, no scaling in terms of your overall score. And verbal reasoning is very important across the Australia and UK. Universities for those countries either have minimum thresholds of entries or just increased weightings for verbal reasoning, maybe even both. For Australian medicine candidates, goal score is 740, 750. For UK medicine candidates, goal score is 730 or 740, okay? And it may sound a bit tough and everything, but I'm not asking you guys to actually get what I am actually, but then the things, these are just goals. So it's important to set yourself a goal, and you set goals, you aim high and everything. That kind of brings myself to that final sort of point and everything, okay? To score 3,000, you need to aim for 3,600. I don't want you guys to come with a defeatist mentality, to come in here and think that you can't get this, you're not going to work towards it. I've seen too much crap online about how you can just work for like 30 questions, only aim for 30. At least in your early stages of tutoring, you don't want to aim for low, you want to aim the highest you can get and work from there. So I repeat, to aim for 3,000, you need to aim for 3,600, okay? And I want to remind you guys as well, just before I shut off this video, that you guys can get private or group tutoring. Follow my tutor finder link and also join my Discord server. I have a link in the description as well. Alrighty, so that concludes the sort of main lesson for today and everything. Just to introduce you guys to verbal reasoning. I thank you all for having watched my video. Just please make sure you just offer a little bit of a like and subscribe. Yeah, you know, YouTubers do always mention that and everything, and I find it personally a bit embarrassing, but it does actually help my channel, and also you will be able to continue to follow and get the best UCAT tips for a person who's gone through that process and has been teaching for multiple years. So it's a pleasure to teach you guys today. I hope to see you guys in the next introduction videos and also the tip videos, which will hopefully be coming out by the end of this month. See you later.